everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Tanzu Community Edition weekly community meeting. Today's date is May 11th, 2022. If you are watching this recording from home, we do encourage you to come join us live. We meet every week, held every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And we also have opportunity to come join us monthly. We meet every second Thursday of the month at 9 a.m. India Standard Time. And these are opportunities for you to come and listen to what the maintainers are working on, provide feedback on what they're working on, bring up any discussion topics you might have, whether that's like a feature request or you need help with anything on how to use the Tanzu Community Edition. It's a really good opportunity to have that discussion in a live format. But if you aren't able to join these and you still want to reach us, there are other ways. You can come find us in the Kubernetes Slack workspace in the Tanzu Community Edition channel. You can find us in the GitHub discussions. You can add your request, question, or suggestion into the issue list. You can email us, or you can find us on Twitter at VMware TCE. For those that are on today's call and those that want to join us in the future, if you do have a discussion topic you want to bring up, you just need to add that to the discussion topic section at the end of the agenda, and we'll get to it towards the conclusion of the meeting. As a reminder, please read and abide by our code of conduct, which is linked out into our repo whenever you're attending these meetings or interacting with any members of our community. And that includes interacting with us through GitHub or email and any of the other above channels. If you are using Tanzu Community Edition, we really want to know more details about how you are using it. So we created this pinned issue, and it just asks you to provide a few details about yourself, about how you are using the Tanzu Community Edition, and if you would like to add your logo to the comment, we would add it to the adopters file here, but that part is optional. Whatever you share here, it's very helpful for our maintainers as they are working to develop the project. And it's also helpful for the community to understand how others are using it in case they might find it helpful to figure out how they can best use it in a similar use case. So we highly encourage you to fill that out. It would be super helpful for us. And for those that are on the call today, just a reminder, please add your name and any organization that you are representing here in the attendees list. Moving on to announcements. So we got several announcements this week. First off, we will not be holding our monthly community meeting that's scheduled to be this week. Instead, we're canceling it, and we'll see you June 9th, which is the second Thursday of June. And then for the next 2 weeks, so next week and the week after, we are canceling this weekly community meeting. And that's in large part to KubeCon happening next week, all of the travel and PTO that folks are going to be on for the next 2 weeks. So it just made sense for us to hold off on meeting until we have something to bring up and to make sure that people that can answer your questions are going to be present. So we'll see you again on June 1st after this meeting. Moving on to some content stuff. The big ticket item here is KubeCon is happening next week in Spain. So there are ways to find us at the event. Several of us are going to be there. Informally, we want to meet you in person. So we will be having lunch every day of the conference in the provided lunch space. Those lunch breaks are scheduled to start at 12:30 Central European Standard Time each day. So, be sure to be there. Look out on Twitter as well as Slack for updates on where we are sitting in that lunch space. So you can come find us and say hello. We can get to know you. Super informal, casual stuff. We just want to meet folks in person when we have the opportunity to do so. And now on to some formal ways to hang out with us and to listen on some talks. We will have some workshops that are hosted by the DevRel team at the VMware booth. We're still ironing out some of those details as to when some of those when some of those workshops are going to be happening and what the actual content will be. I know there's going to be several different ones with several different interesting forms of content. So be on the lookout for those details. We'll try to share them in Twitter and Slack once we have them, and let you know more as soon as we have that information. So I see Nancy, Robert. Sorry?
I said, this is Dan Basket. Just wanted to, I can give a little more detail there. So the workshops are self-service. So there'll be 3 systems set up with operations, developer-focused workshops. I believe they'll have 6 different workshops going, and the ways to earn swag by going through those workshops.
Okay, that's very useful. Thank you. Cool. And then said Robert asked, will there be Tanzu TCE stickers at the booth? I imagine there's going to be some Tanzu stickers. Not sure TCE stickers in particular. I'll have to look into that. And then Stephen Pousey says Whitley Lee has a talk on Friday at 2. He thinks it might be about Knative. And then she's also speaking on Knative Day. So Whitney Lee is with the DevRel team. We'll put that information on there as well. Once we have a little bit more. Anything else in the VMware booth stuff before we move on to the talks? Okay. So we have several talks that the team is doing, and they're not necessarily about TCE, but these are folks that do work on TCE, and they're talking about different stuff that relates to stuff that they work on, or they're interested in, or they're passionate about when it comes to Kubernetes related and cloud native related items. So we have David, he's doing a talk at the Cloud Native Rejects. We have V, who is doing a keynote at KNativeCon. That one is particularly about TCE. We have John McBride, one of the maintainers for TCE, doing a talk at KubeCon on Wednesday. Have myself doing a talk about being a community manager on Thursday. And then Stephen Wong has, I think, about 5 talks he's doing at KubeCon between Thursday and Friday. So be sure to check out all of those talks. Come find us, come say hello. We would love to see you. Anything else regarding KubeCon before we move forward? All right, other announcements. So the team is aware, so folks in the community are aware in case they are interested in submitting a talk covering anything related to Tanzu Community Edition. The KubeCon, Cloud Native Con North America CFP closes May 27th, which is the following week after KubeCon Europe. And it's coming up really fast. It's gonna be closing in about 2.5 weeks. So just keep that in mind. If you are interested in doing a talk over TCE and you aren't part of the core team, please reach out to us. We would love to know more about what you plan on submitting, and maybe we can do a joint talk, who knows? But yeah, let us know on that. Moving on to the release that happened just yesterday. So we released Odot 12. We have a link out to the release notes here. There's several blog posts for you to review. Super, really interesting stuff here covering enhancements to unmanaged clusters and the app toolkit, as well as now being able to use TCE from the Docker desktop extension. So with that, I'm actually going to kick it over to John to show you what that is all about.
Yeah, if I could grab the screen. All right, and Keynote, avert your eyes while I start playing. I guess. All right, yeah, 0.12.0 just released yesterday. And as we have kind of noted in a bunch of other demos before this, there's a bunch of other cool features in our managed cluster and in the packages, app toolkit 0.2.0. But one thing that was a bit under wraps that if you missed the DockerCon keynote yesterday is that Tanzu Community Edition actually now has a Docker desktop extension. And the whole extension's, I guess, framework and sort of feature is new in Docker desktop. So what I want to do is actually let's take a quick peek at this. Let me go over to Docker desktop. Here is the extension. Let me move the Zoom controls. And this is the extension here. Huge shout out to Jorge and other people involved in the DevRel team. This was a huge effort on their part, sort of getting this bootstrapped and ready. But from this tab right here, from this extension right here, Tanzu Community Edition, we can create a cluster. So let's just do that. We're going to create cluster. And for a lot of people who have sort of been tuning in and following along with development through the cycles of all this, these logs that'll pop up here should look pretty familiar, actually. These are the unmanaged cluster logs. And kind of behind the scenes, what's happening is what's getting created is a unmanaged cluster. And it gives the user on Docker desktop here the sort of, I guess, Kubernetes right from this extension. So this will take just a hot minute again to get going, but and it might be lagging just because I'm sharing my screen. So this is supported on an M1 Mac, which I have right here running. Obviously the Intel Macs, Windows, and then Linux Docker desktop support is sort of experimental, even beta, but in theory, it should work there as well. So yeah, if there's any intermittent questions, I see something popped up in chat. What's the red, green, 100% bar at the bottom? Oh, that's my battery. Yeah, that's a Tmux framework for what my battery is on this laptop. Go Tmux. Yeah, so this will just take a second. What's happening right now is the cluster has bootstrapped. Again, if you've been following along behind the scenes, what's happening is a kind cluster has been created, and we're sort of instantiating a lot of the Tanzu bits and experience things on top of that. Right now is cap controller. Next is the package repository with the core packages and the user managed packages. So right away, the users can get going with getting app toolkit installed or observability stuff, or really whatever is on there is available. So this will just take another second. Any questions about this? I can also show, we do have docs as well. So let's head over to Tanzu Community Edition docs.
I have a
we
question,
have
John.
release star 0.12 docs. So yeah, go ahead.
Does that put in any more packages than the standard Tanzu unmanaged cluster create, or is it basically exactly the same?
It is exactly the same. This is the same. Sorry, go ahead.
I thought he did something with routing though, so that like you actually have a routable local host address in the cluster.
Yeah, that's a great question. We can look at that quick. So if we do Docker PS, output's a little gross, but you can see that we have 443 exposed and also 80, just 80 looks like. So those were kind of the same defaults of like, okay, if somebody wants to deploy Grafana, then 80 will just be available on the host into the container so that they can see their dashboards or whatever, or my web app or something. So those are the two same defaults. that we provide just out of the box. As far as other configurations, there's not much right now that we can do to configure that cluster deployed via Docker Desktop, but that is definitely feedback we're looking for in the future to be able to configure this and add, an unmanaged cluster config file that you could drop in maybe or something. Yeah, but kind of what I was showing here. So yeah, if you go into our docs and then the getting started, under getting started is deploy with Docker Desktop, and we'll walk you through all the steps on doing this as well. Yeah, I don't know why this is taking a hot minute, but once this finishes, we will be able to use kubectl to get stuff on the pods, look at resources, and if you have the Tanzu Community Edition CLI installed, then from there you can do all the packages and things. So, say more chat. What else is in here? John's awesome meter. Over 9,000. Thank you. Yep, huge shout out to Jorge. He did a great job on this and drove a lot of the sort of work getting this out there. The engineering team only came in at the 11th hour to help kind of get this across the finish line. So huge shout out there. Any other questions on this while this is bootstrapping?
It's slow because you're on VPN.
Oh, is that what it is? Oh, you're totally right. Well, I can't disconnect now. Yeah, so for those unaware, some of the images and networking takes just a tad bit longer on the VMware VPN, but that's okay. So yeah, this gives you a pretty good idea. Maybe I'll just continue on. This gives you a pretty good idea of what you can do from this extension when it finishes. Oh, there it goes. All right, it should be done in just a second now after the package repositories. So when it finishes, the other option you get in this dashboard here is an actual delete. The delete then would just get rid of that cluster. If we look at containers, this is interesting. I have a bunch of BuildX stuff, but down here we can see the Tanzu Community Edition control plane. This is the actual pod, the kind cluster that's running, or I guess container that's actually running the Kubernetes. Behind the scenes here, I have something checkmarked so I can see sort of the behind the scenes here. This is the container that is actually doing the bootstrapping from Docker extensions. So these are kind of the two behind the scenes things. If we come back over here, still doing the package install. Yeah, that was my mistake being on VPN. Good to know for next time. I can also show quick those two other demos that I think I linked in here. I linked these two YouTube demos. The first one is one from a few weeks ago with Unmanaged Clusters Minikube provider that came in 0.12. And then also the install packages and some of the nice to have features around installing packages is in this demo as well. That was from, I think, just 2 weeks ago. So definitely check out those demos to get kind of a really good overview of what is a part of this 0.12 release. All right, cluster is running. Cool beans. Can I get pods now? There they are. All right, great. So everything is up, and just like with the unmanaged cluster sort of normal workflow, if you did Tanzu unmanaged cluster, create my cluster, it will merge the kube config automatically. And it also comes with kubectl when you do this from like a brand new system. So if you have a new computer, you get Docker Desktop, you get the Tanzu Community Edition extension, it should have kubectl as well, so you can start doing stuff. And then I actually might not have Tanzu on here right now. Nope. But in a normal case, you do Tanzu, package install, et cetera. And this is the full experience from this point onward. We come back to Docker Desktop, cluster is running, everything's looking good. This tab here is useful if you need to grab the raw kube config with all the secrets and all that stuff in case something went wrong or you got like some disconnection or something. This is the kube config so you can access the container on your host. So then if I come over here, I do a delete and that container just gets blown away. And there it is, it's gone. So that is the Tanzu Community Edition Docker Desktop extension. Kind of brings me back to point 0 where we can create a cluster from here. Yeah, any other questions or thoughts from there? Yeah, some good discussion on the M1. Josh made a good point that not all packages may work with ARM, which is the Apple M1 computer. Looks like there's some troubleshooting happening as well. Definitely happy to help you troubleshoot in the Slack as well. But that's it for me.
So just putting my PM hat on, just a quick note. Anything like, please try this out if you're a Docker user. See if it works for you. If it doesn't, like I can see Yunusa having trouble with it in the chat. Anything that doesn't work, let us know. If there's a feature missing that we really need to work on, let us know. We're actively working on this right now, and any feedback is very much valued. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, awesome, good stuff. Thanks, John, and thanks, V, for bringing that up. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Moving on to, before I move on, just want to point out there are 2 other demos here for Minikube and install package, so be sure to look at those as well. Okay. Oh, whoops. What's happened? Where am I? Please. There we go. Okay. Updates. Product management, roadmap updates. V, you want me to just spit this out, or do you have more you want to say on it?
Nah, go ahead.
So we are currently working on some roadmap updates, some more like processes. So once we're back from KubeCon and all the traveling that we've been doing, so sometime in June, we will have more details, and we're going to present that new process. And what we're hoping for is the community to have more involvement in how the roadmap is developed. So stay tuned for more details regarding that. And we hope to have something more to share come June. How's that? That worked? Did that work, V?
Yep, that's great. So this is another area where I'm looking forward to hear what everyone has to say and their experiences, and what's working, what's not. We're listening, and so we're trying to make the process reflect that. So for the next release for V13, we're already working on some things. V14 is going to be basically everyone's fault, whatever we end up doing. So we're just trying to. I was going to make a joke about we're going to spread the blame if anything goes wrong. I'm not sure that's a good joke to make. So let's pretend I didn't say anything.
You can blame me. I'll take it all.
Yeah, it's
That's
all
what I'm here
Nancy,
for.
really.
Yeah, I manage the community. I take the blame. Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next point. We have a guided UI demo coming up. Justin, want me to?
Sure, yeah. Hi, folks. I'll go ahead and share my screen. And okay, all right. So it's probably been a little while since folks who are interested in this project have really heard from us. I know Steve and Jorge gave us some really valuable feedback early on with some of the mock-ups. And since then, we've been heads down, really just trying to get a working model up and running. So a lot of what you'll see here is, partially complete. There are definitely areas that need additional work, content, copy, and so forth. But just wanted to give an idea of where we're at. And hopefully soon, as we have things working end to end, we'll be able to solicit some more feedback, see how things feel as folks in the community can try the plugin out that we have. So yeah, just taking a step back, we do have a working plugin for the CLI that is very specific to UI for cluster creation, for management cluster creation, workload cluster creation, and we'll be moving forward on unmanaged cluster creation soon. Mockups are currently being worked on there. Just one other point, if you guys have feedback, please just hold off and we'll take it at the end of this walkthrough here. But what you're seeing here is the welcome screen or landing page that the user will first reach when they fire the plugin up. And the CLI launches a browser window and this UI comes up. So what we have here is very basic intro. If folks are know what they're doing, they're ready to jump in, they can go ahead and get started. It's clear and right in front of their face here. Additional content on this screen, we have this kind of rollover banner component, which gives us an opportunity to maybe help answer some of those important questions that a first-time user might have up front. Maybe direct the user towards information on the community experience. But some other thoughts we have here were for maybe cross-pollination of other products and areas of the suite. Specifically, like managing clusters at scale. This could potentially be sort of like a call to action for the user to learn a little bit more about TMC, or once they've gone ahead and created their managed clusters, learn a little bit more about TAP in an application platform. So we'll work on the content here, but just the framework is in place. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Let's Get Started. Now, the next screen that we have here is talks a little bit more in depth about the types of clusters that can be created, and is sort of a little bit of a launch pad for diving into those workflows. The first two obvious ones are management cluster and workload cluster. The app will detect if management clusters are already created, or the CLI is aware of existing management clusters, and only enable the create workload cluster button here if a management cluster is found. And then we do also have a call out to unmanaged clusters down here. We've worked a fair amount on these graphics, but they are subject to change. Definitely open to any feedback there. And what I'll do here is jump into the creative management cluster workflow, where the user will then have to select the cloud provider that they want to create the cluster on. The workflow that we're working on first right now is AWS. Raymond is working on the Docker workflow as well, but AWS is a bit more complete. So we jump into the AWS management cluster create workflow, and what we have here is what we've been calling the simplified workflow, where what we do is sort of in the background set as many reasonable and recommended defaults as possible, so that we have to expose as few controls to the user as possible. Later in the development cycle, what we'll be doing is working on sort of an advanced settings view, where a more experienced user can tweak more of the knobs and switches as they see fit. But what we've done here is try to identify really just the minimum number of inputs that a user needs to successfully stand up a management cluster. So the AWS credential screen here, somewhat familiar to what folks may have seen in the Kickstart UI, whether you select a credential profile or the one-time or temporary credentials for authentication. So right now I have this UI running just against a mock API server. So a lot of the data that you'll see here is all mock data. Although we currently are working on full end-to-end integration, and we do have the majority of APIs working end-to-end here. So I'll select a credential profile. I'm going to select a region. I'll connect. will likely show like, connection successful message here, just haven't gotten to it yet. And then one of the nice features that you might notice on this page is that Sean has helped us add an API for Ec2 Key Pair Discovery, which I've tested end to end and is working. So I'll just go ahead and select one of the mock key pairs and hit next. So as you can see, really simple, only 2 steps to this wizard. Now on the cluster settings screen here, there are just a couple of choices that are required. First setting a cluster name, and then the control plane node profile. And what this does is it simplifies some of the controls that folks might be familiar with in the Kickstart UI, where it makes the selection between like a dev being single node or production 3-node control plane, and ties that in with a recommended AWS instance type underneath. So we have, your standard single node deployment, a high availability deployment, which uses the same instance type as the single node, and then a production ready high availability control plane node profile, which is also, production or 3 nodes, but with a different instance type underlying. One thing that I'll point out on this screen is that because we are setting so many recommended defaults, the user might want to see what some of those settings are. We haven't implemented it yet, but I threw a clarity flat button in here to illustrate that the user would be able to click, some call to action, and will likely bring up a modal window that shows a lot of the underlying settings, whether it be, service siders, IPs, what the actual instance types are, and so forth. So once the user's completed this step, we'll go ahead and create the management cluster. Also a somewhat familiar view as to what is seen in the Kickstart UI, but in addition, we have called out some next steps for the user here. A link to the location of the management cluster configuration file, maybe a CLI command equivalent for generating a workload cluster off of that management cluster. And we could also play with some other useful links down here. So I'm going to go back and let's get started. Now I'm going to dive into what we imagine the workload cluster creation workflow might look like. And this is pretty powerful. So I'm going to just have to ask you to all kind of, look through a creative lens here, understand that we haven't gotten around to CSS styling and making this all look really pretty, but have done a ton of work on some of the underlying technology here that we're building out. So the first step in creating a workload cluster would be, selecting the management cluster that you want to create it on. So we're going to go ahead and select the first one here. The user will have to add in, again, some very basic information and selections here, being a cluster name. So we'll say my first WC and select a recommended instance type, which will, likely be, as you can see, a slightly different list of, recommended profiles that you might have noticed in management cluster creation. I'll just select basic demo and move to the next screen. And this is where the magic really happens. So the workload cluster creation workflow is based on cluster class, which folks may or may not be familiar with yet. But cluster class is sort of like a well-defined format or topology for creating workload clusters that extends beyond what folks have seen with a traditional config YAML or legacy style approach. So what Shimon has done here is started on building out a data-driven UI that's based on the cluster class variables, which we think in the long run will be very, very powerful. And these cluster class variables are categorized a few different ways. There are optional variables, which, the user is probably like 50-50 going to want to actually take a look at and make some tweaks to, whether it be the cluster plan, whether it be, size, control plane size, worker node size, and so forth. There's another category here, which are far more advanced variables, but not required. What I'm going to do is step back and select I hope I select the right one, a different management cluster. Okay, and we can see that the categories have changed from 2 different categories to this additional one, which is required variables. And that's because this workload cluster is being deployed on a management cluster which exists on vSphere. And therefore, there are some required variables that the user absolutely must enter to have a successful workload cluster creation. So I think that's the majority of what I have. Shimon, if I missed anything on the workload cluster workflow, please let me know. But any questions or comments?
We do have just about 5 minutes left. So if any folks have any questions or comments, we have about 5 minutes to discuss.
I wanted to just add one thing to what Justin was saying. He's absolutely right that that's a data-driven UI there for creating a workload cluster. The idea being that whatever cluster class is on that management cluster can be used to deploy a workload cluster. Ideally, that means that in the future, if somebody created a cluster class on their management cluster that was custom to the way they do their workflow, they could use our UI to actually create workload clusters using their personalized cluster class. That's what we're aiming for.
That's amazing. That was what I was just about to ask, because I use Core Cappy and have a bunch of cluster classes. So that's awesome. This looks amazing from a user perspective. I'm very excited for this.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and once we get the end-to-end story for some of the workflows tested out a little bit more, we definitely want to get this in the hands of folks who are interested in trying it out and installing the plugin, providing some feedback. But definitely just want to have that working code, the stake in the ground before we get stuck iterating too much over mockups and start to lose out on the timeline here.
Is the idea down the road to also add package installation from here as well, or anything of management of a cluster day 2 upgrades or anything like that? I know that's far out and this is already a huge improvement. Just wondering what the scope of this is planned to include.
No, that's a great question. I mean, the fact that we're now leveraging, an individual component for the UI, I think will give us that flexibility. I would have to defer to V to make the PM call there. We absolutely could. And of course, we're all for it. We want this UI to be as robust as possible.
Yeah, so with install packages introduced now, that becomes basically it's one step closer to that direction. We have not planned, since you asked specifically what's planned, so we have not planned for this yet, but it's definitely something to be looked at. So don't have any formal plans, but we don't have them, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Yep. Awesome.
Great. Anyone else? Any other questions, comments? Okay, I'll stop sharing. And I did create a GitHub issue for this plugin where we can collect some general feedback pre-MVP. I can share that link out, and you know, it's you know, really something that's just intended for our UI team and designers to have a look at and kind of take that feedback. So I'll share that in the chat here. All right, thank you.
I'm gonna add this link to our meeting notes. So if anyone wants to chime in later, feel free to, well, please add your comments there.
Yeah, thank you, V. Read my mind. And thank you, Justin, for showing us that. It's really awesome to see the progress y'all have made. It's super exciting. Looking forward to folks that are watching this from home and hearing y'all's feedback as well. So with that, we are at time. And we are so happy that y'all joined us today. Again, we aren't meeting next week or the week after. We'll be meeting again the first week of June, on June 1st. If you are attending KubeCon, please be sure to come find us. Keep up to date on where we are and where we'll be at lunch on Twitter and on Slack. And we're super excited to see everybody in person in Spain, and we look forward to meeting everybody. With that, have a good one. See you soon.